Okay, this is the sampling video for research methods. If I can just remind you as you listen to this video to write the Cornell notes as best you can and also answer the questions that I'll ask as we go through the video. Once you've finished, write this up as neatly as you can into your mind map and have a little look through some of the additional textbooks. Now, when we start to think about sampling, the first thing we need to try and think about is our target population. So this is the whole group of individuals that, as a researcher, you're interested in finding out about. So this could be everybody in the UK. This could be teenagers. This could be people of a particular religion. What we will then need to do is we need to identify a smaller proportion of those individuals called the sampling frame. So these are people that we are able to take our participants out of. Now, ideally, this sampling frame needs to be broadly representative of the wider target population. So there's no point going, my target population is the entirety of the UK, but my sampling frame is a school with children from 11 to 16. That simply wouldn't be generalizable to the wider UK population. So what you might do is say all babies in the UK, your sampling frame might be born in Stoke 2017. There might be some problems with that, but that's just what you've got access to. And then that might narrow down to maybe the 35 volunteers who would actually come forward and take part of it. So you're hoping to have those 35 volunteers ultimately represent all the babies in the UK. Okay, so we're going to go through a few different ways of getting a sample. Now, some of these terms you may already think, well, you know what they mean, but they mean very precise things when it comes to sampling, and they need to be explained in a very particular way when you're asked about them. Okay, so random. Random means every member of the population, the entire population, has a chance of selection. Now, I don't think there's really been that many truly random samples because of the difficulty of even getting every number of the population. But ideally, how you try and go about this is you would get a list of all the people that are in your sampling frame. You would place all their names into a hat or container, and then you draw the required number. Now, I've written how in capital letters and then told you how. Quite regularly there is a question of how you would go about getting a sampling frame, how you go about taking a sample. So you need to be quite clear about not just what you're going to do, but how you're going to do it. Another way of taking a random sample is to assign everybody a number, put those numbers into a random number generator, and then use a random number generator to draw the numbers and ultimately the people. Okay, so that's physically how you do it. So what's good about this? Well, if you're drawing people as best you can at random, it's not you making the decision about who's in the study, or even them. So that means that your sample should be unbiased. It should mean that everybody's got an equal chance of selection, therefore your data shouldn't skew in one way without you meaning it to. Of course, it being random, there is likely that you would get a whole bunch of participants who in some way aren't generalizable, like if you did a random sample of the UK and you drew 50 names out of a hat, could by chance maybe all be female, which then wouldn't of course be generalizable for the whole population. Okay, so some problems with this. Well, yeah, if you're going to try and get a full list of the population, this can take some considerable time, especially if your population size is large. So truly random samples, as I've said, aren't particularly common. Okay, another option is a systematic sample. So this is where we'll have a list. So we might have a register, or we might have a phone book, or in some way some sort of document which lists individuals. And then what we would use, we use a predetermined system before we start taking participants, and we'll say, well, we'll choose every 5th person or every 20th person or every 40th person, and then you'd go through, say, the phone book, and you'd pick each of those individuals to contact to take part in the study. What does this mean? Well, it should mean, again, that as you're not directly choosing those people to take part in your study, it should be fairly unbiased. It should be objective. A downside is, well, you can select all these people from the phone book if you like, but now everyone selected is going to agree to take part. And again, maybe it could be slightly time consuming to do this. Okay, the next one, and possibly the best way of taking a sample, is a stratified sample. So what this means is you would look at your population, and rather than just straight away trying to randomly gain individuals, which I said could accidentally produce a bias sample, you will look at different aspects of the population. So maybe you look at gender or ethnicity or class or income level, and you would say, well, I need this number of people in my study, which is the same proportion of those people in the wider population. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the general population is 50% male, 50% females. You would want 50% males and 50% females within your study. So you identify your subgroups or your strata, and then you'd select from them. So then you'd probably use a random selection method or a systematic method to then select from those strata. So a real big positive from this is very likely to be representative of the general population, whereas a random and a systematic sample could just by chance not be representative. For a stratified sample, you're pretty much ensuring that is going to represent the general population. A slight downside to this is it's very difficult to maybe be objective about choosing what is important to have as a strata. You can't have every conceivable difference between people as a strata, because it would just simply take too long. And again, another negative to this is the time it takes. But by choosing certain things to select for, you might be bringing in some sort of bias. Okay, the next one is by far the most common method of gaining participants for psychology. This is simply because it is the most easy way to go about it. This is simply gaining individuals that are kind of close to you physically. Just, you see someone in the corridor, you ask them directly, and you ask if they're available. And you might, if you're a teacher, you might go to your class and you might go, guys, could you take part in my study? That is an opportunity sample. So how you do go about it, you simply go up and ask people. The main positive of this is it is very quick to get your sample. Generally, people feel a little bit guilted into it. They don't really like saying no, so you would pick up your sample quite quickly. Of course, this is quite biased, because generally you're going to pick up your sample from those people that you know, or the places that you're looking for your sample, which might be a very small geographical area. Now, one of the big problems in psychology is most people who've taken part in psychology experiments have been white, male, psychology undergraduates, quite often Americans. So that's a very small population in the world, and then a lot of what we do in psychology is to say, well, this generalizes to everybody, and there's an argument that most of what we know may not be generalizable. Okay, and the last one, volunteer. Now, there's often a tendency to assume a volunteer is going up to people and asking them, and then them agreeing to take part. So that's an opportunity sample. We need to be very clear, if we're talking about a volunteer sample, that the participants see in some way that the research is taking place, not being asked directly from the researcher or anybody else. And then they take it upon themselves to go and contact the researcher. So what you might see is an advertisement. Now, this would vary depending on where the location is. If it's a hospital, it might be in the waiting rooms. If it's in a school, it might be in the cafeteria. If it's in an airport, it might be in the checkout lounge. So you would place advertisements, maybe on the radio as well, and then people would get back to you. So this is a bit more drawn out, you can see, than the opportunity sample, and clearly a little bit more difficult perhaps to to actually get a large number of participants, because you could get quite a broad selection of individuals that go past your posters, especially if it's somewhere where lots of different types of people go, like a hospital. However, the downside is many people might see these posters, but only certain types of people are going to agree to take part. So these are going to be generally helpful people, and you know what? I don't want to know just what helpful people are like. I want to know what unhelpful people are like. So that's one of our downsides to the volunteer sample. Okay, that's today's topic.